definitely, a challenge to get back into it. But like you guys said, like Rob was mentioning, you feel kind of slower in your responses, your muscle memory. So you're reaching for controls a little bit with a little bit more forethought, maybe. But that first leg was great. And I flew with a captain that I recognized. We had flown together about 2 years prior. And we recognized each other right away, said hello. And I remembered that he was into like horseback archery and he remembered where I lived. And so it was nice to have that connection. Sometimes you fly with someone and go, have we flown together?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe, I guess. But that wasn't the case here. Well, we had a flight coming from Philly to Los Angeles, which was our come home leg or go home leg. And that was last night. And so after doing a short leg into Philadelphia, a 3-hour sit, then we had the Philly to LA leg, and it was the go home leg. And then the pre-flight briefing was my leg to fly. The captain said, well, what are any threats? And I said, go home leg. I said, you need to catch a commuter flight. So you're eager to get there. We're crossing the country and there's a little bit of weather that we have to contend with. A little bit of mountain wave was reported over the Colorado area. So anything that can go wrong is going to go wrong. And I said, so with that said, we're going to have a safe flight. And we went on with the brief. And we kind of chuckled because this is like Murphy's Law. This is what happens.
Yeah.
We get to the airplane and, the airplane had been sitting there for maybe about an hour. And we get to the gate and first thing we're doing, I just got back in for my walk around and the number one flight attendant says, hey, we need water and juice. The catering came and they left and we don't have any water and juice and we need water minimum, but we'd like to have those two for first class. And so, okay, there's a phone call, right? So, oh yeah, we'll send them back out. While we're sitting there at the gate, we get an ECAM message, the engine, or was it electronic crew alerting message display, or ICAS for some aviators out there. And this, it was a kind of a nuisance message, but we had to have it cleared. So now we're calling maintenance. Stop what I'm doing, call maintenance, have them come out, tell them what's going on. They came, they reset a couple computers, and that went away. And then we just kept getting distracted. So the normal flow of things on the go home leg was interrupted continuously for those 45 minutes that we normally take while the passengers are boarding to set up the cockpit or the flight deck as is required. But we still ran our checklist. We still did our flows, and we maintained strict adherence to making sure that nothing got missed. After pushback, it was a very short taxi. If any of you are familiar with Philadelphia, the Legacy Airlines terminal is relatively close to that particular runway that we were taking off from. So, we briefed that, it's going to be a relatively short taxi. Let's take care of all our control checks once we push off the gate before we even move. That way we can concentrate on taxiing. And we never got our final numbers. So what are final numbers? Final numbers are our last weight and balance. So we have the gate agent that sends how many passengers are on the plane. We have the rampers that send what the final cargo load numbers are. The fuelers, they have put the fuel in and we sent that to them. That's our responsibility. So how many pounds of fuel we have on the airplane. And all these other departments that send all these numbers into the computer, once those numbers are in, it's an all automated system, and it sends a message to the cockpit, and we get out of our printer in the cockpit our final numbers, or our weight and balance, or our closeout, whatever you want to call it. And we never received it. So, okay, now we're taxiing, relatively short taxi. Are you ready to go, Legacy? No, we're not. We don't have our final numbers. All right, turn here, turn there. And we had to get out of line and, park, set the parking brake. Let's make a few phone calls. So now we're on the radio calling the load planner and saying, hey, we didn't get our numbers. Oh, we sent them to you. We didn't get them. Well, we sent them to you. Well, let's check the printer. No, we didn't get them. So we had to then go on our EFBs, our electronic flight bag, our tablet, and we had to go through an app that we have to see, well, let's see what's in the computer, because if it's there, we can then verify the numbers, and if we do all that, we can go. And that's what we ended up doing. Distraction, distraction, distraction. So by the time we're in the air, we're passing through 10,000 feet, and we both kind of stopped what we were doing, which was we were just doing, the captain was doing his flow through 10,000 feet, and I usually do a verification of what we call our displays. So I'm checking, oil and electronics and pressurization, just because at 10,000 feet, if you got to come back, you can easily just turn around. So I usually, it's a habit. When the captain's doing his thing, that's my trigger to do my thing. And we stopped and we never got our progress report, our flight prog. And just like when you're a private pilot, you fill out a flight plan, whether that's VFR or IFR, and you put waypoints and checkpoints and how much time it should take you and how much fuel you should have at each checkpoint and what are the winds. And well, we do that. You do that from day one as a private pilot, and you do it all the way through when you're a senior captain at a mainline carrier or cargo carrier or whatever. So that report never came out. Again, didn't come from the printer. So now the captain's like, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to call dispatch on our crew phone, and it's your aircraft, your radios. So he goes into his EFB, since we have a Wi-Fi connection on most of our aircraft over at Legacy Airlines. He used this crew phone to contact dispatch, and I could hear him, off on the side saying, hey, this is Captain so-and-so, we're on flight this and this. We never got our prog report, and we had to use an alternate method to pull out an electronic weight and balance. What's going on? Come to find out that over in dispatch, they had selected the ACARS off for our flight. At least that's what they told them. So we weren't getting any of the information that we were needing for the flight. So he had turned it on. He apologized. He goes, oh, I'm sorry about that. So he turned it on, apologized, and pushed over a new flight progress report so we can keep track of the fuel burn and time and all that stuff. So distraction, distraction, distraction. So what I got out of that was an idea for today's show. Let's talk about how distractions can easily find themselves into the flight deck and potentially make your job a much more harder. Roger, you deal with distractions, I'm sure, quite a bit. How can you think of a couple examples and how you handle them?
Well, we do. Yes. All right. It's kind of an interesting topic. Lots of things are kind of going through my mind as you were describing that. The first of which is, you guys are so spoiled. You guys are pilots. You guys are pilots. That's all you do.
Yeah.
And you guys talk about all these distractions from this pilot standpoint. You want to talk about distractions, man? You all you have is this stuff that's happening up on the flight deck, and I think I mostly just kind of made me laugh about how spoiled you guys are in the 121 world. Kind of getting back to the topic, distractions they're an everyday fact of life. Quite frankly, I guess. As I was kind of just alluding to, I think that maybe they're a little bit more common in the environment that I'm flying at, simply because we don't have any flight attendants on our airplane. A lot of people do not also. Some do, but most do not.
Yeah.
And so, our jobs encompass dispatch, our jobs encompass flight attendants, our job encompasses weathermen, our job encompasses piloting as well. And anytime there's anything coming from the back, I mean, mostly the distractions that we have are the people in the back. Hey, how come the internet's not working? Or they're
I'm on the short final. What are you talking about? Get back there.
They're up in the galley.
First world problems. I get it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, where are the napkins?
Yeah.
Well, where is this? Well, where is that? And oh, by the way, how come the internet's not working?
Did you fix that yet?
And so sometimes I'm IT. I'm trying to fix the internet, or I'm trying to troubleshoot and what's going on. And we have some other things that for passenger comfort, and that is also under our purview because there is nobody else. You guys were worried about your progress reports. That's great. The internet's not working.
The internet's not working. Why isn't it working, son?
But I think that obviously the important part of this is that all of those things have to still be managed, no matter what your responsibilities are, to make sure that you're filling out your progress report for dispatch to make sure that they have their fuel burn down to the pound, or whether it's trying to figure out why the internet's not working for the guy who needs to check his emails in the back. All those things still have to be managed because in the end, the final authority and safety of that flight obviously begins and ends with the two pilots up front, especially where on our operation, because we do have a fair amount more responsibilities to the people in the back. Positive transfer of controls, like you were talking about. Hey, you got the airplane and you have the radios, and that's the same thing where we're at. Depending on who's flying and who kind of knows more. Typically, I'm with the exception of kind of what the chief pilot, I probably know more about what's going on than the rest of our group. So it's, hey, it's your airplane and your radios, because I got to get up and I got to go into the back and I got to start playing around with
I got to reset the router. The modem's acting up again.
Or dig out more napkins from storage or whatever it might happens to be. But in the end, all of these things have to be managed, and making sure that somebody's always flying the airplane, somebody's always paying attention to what's going on, because I'm sure that this is probably where you're going to go in this episode. If you look at pretty much any incident or any accident, it's never one mistake that's going to cause that. It's a series. And if you're able to just break that chain at any point, you're probably going to be able to dodge the bullet, if you will. But you always have to make sure that somebody is managing and not dealing with the distraction, because otherwise that's when you end up with that string to disaster.
Yeah, we used to call it CRM, but now all the airline companies out there, including Legacy, calls it the threat and error management model. It's also known as the Swiss cheese model, and the principle is you have these layers or barriers that are there to protect you from an aircraft accident or incident, or something to distract you to the point of a catastrophic event. And in those layers or barriers, there are holes like Swiss cheese, and sometimes things get through those barriers, and hopefully there's one barrier of the pilots. Obviously that's the first barrier, and then the second barrier is the procedures, the standard operating procedures, the manuals that you're supposed to comply with, your knowledge base. And then there's another barrier of ATC, and another one's dispatch, and another one's your flight attendant crew or passengers in a Part 91 that might be in the back that could, if something went wrong, they could assist you by going, I hear this or I see this. And there's so many barriers, and hopefully they'll be trapped by the time they go through all these layers. We also have something called the ABCs. This is a newer model that they've recently been teaching us here on the airline side of things. And the ABCs are all about how you assess a situation that's going wrong, that your distraction might lead to something that you didn't catch. So you assess it or you discover it. Once you do that, you balance your barriers. That's the B. And then the C is communicate. You want to communicate with your fellow pilot, with ATC, with whoever is responsible for the safety of that flight. And the final one, the ABCs, the S, is your standard operating procedures. And so they're teaching us this new method. It's in conjunction with the threat and error management model, or the TEM. We now have the ABCs to help, stop issues from getting missed. That weak link in the chain, as Roger mentioned. Now, Rob, as a former Czech airman, a current 737 pilot, what have you seen or experienced that also can contribute to the discussion of distractions on the flight deck?
There's been many in my experience, but just recently, I had one flying into Sacramento last month. I may have talked about it in a previous episode, but all in a nutshell, we were descending into Sacramento, and the California fires were smoking air, fogging, not fogging, but smoking everything up. So the visibility in Sacramento was below like 2 miles. I think it was like a mile and a half in smoke.
Wow.
So it was really thick smoke, and we were just descending into it, and we just come over we just got onto over I guess the mountain range there, and we were cleared for the LNAV VNAV approach. So we were still at like 12,000 feet. So in the 737, once you get cleared for the approach, you can go ahead as long as the vertical guidance and lateral guidance is captured by the autopilot and the flight guidance computer. You can just set the minimums on the altitude selector, and the aircraft will follow the the path all the way down to the runway using automation, and it's great. We all talk about it. Autopilot is great for kind of dialing down the amount of things you need to monitor. You can just sit back and just manage the aircraft and make sure it's making the crossing restrictions and the air speeds, and all you have to do is configure the aircraft, and once it's lined up, turn the autopilot off and land the airplane. Well, when we were cleared for the approach, we were cleared to a different point that we were expecting to go to. So we had to reprogram the FMC or the FMS, and extract the proper fix out of the database. Well, when the captain went to do that, since he was a pilot monitoring, which is the person that handles all that stuff, he accidentally selected the wrong fix. And when that happened, it dumped all the information that the autopilot was tracking. So the autopilot reverted back to a basic pitch and lateral mode. So it just basically maintained whatever descent rate it had and whatever heading it was on in basic lateral mode. So it really wasn't following anything at all. And I'm the flying pilot, so it's my job to keep the airplane from hitting the ground. And you were still at 12,000 feet and descending. So, I mean, there's plenty of altitude to play with, although we just passed, the, 8,000, 9,000 foot mountain peaks behind us. Yeah. But we were descending into the smoke, and it got really, really busy up there really quick, because I needed, within a relatively short period of time, I needed that information displayed so I can stay on the approach. And the captain was having a hard time getting that data programmed properly in the FMS. So I was really close to saying, calling ATC and saying, all right, we lost the data. Can you give me an altitude and a heading to fly so that we can get ourselves back together again? But and I'm sitting there and I'm, just really, really fighting the urge to help the captain, with the FMC.
Right.
I saw what he did wrong, but I really needed to focus on, aviate, fly the airplane, and keep the airplane going in the right direction and keeping the airplane away from the ground. So it was tough, and that was a big distraction. And once we got, so, and the other thing was, you kind of relax, I think, a little bit when the automation's taking the airplane over. It's going to fly the altitudes, it's going to fly the air speeds. It automatically does all that stuff for you. It's going to fly the headings, and then when all that stuff is gone, all of a sudden, boom, you got like three things you need to, refocus on again. Not so much, airspeed, altitude, and heading, but you need to make sure that from a procedure point of view, you're at least going to come close to following those things. Yeah. So, and then all that stuff was lost. So I had to like reorientate myself with where the airplane was on the approach, what was the actual next fix that we were coming up to, because all that stuff dropped out, and just kind of keep the airplane going where it needed to go, and just, hopefully the captain can get everything back when you needed it. And that was a huge distraction. So, I mean, it's stuff like that that can progress to an aircraft incident or an aircraft accident, or you can violate an FAR or a clearance or something like that. So, those are the times where the distractions are though you can learn from them, but holy mackerel, you really have to. Exactly. You really have to, revert to your training of aviate, navigate, communicate, pilot flying, pilot monitoring. What are the jobs you got to do, and focus on keeping that airplane out of the dirt, because things happen, like you said, it happens quickly. Just as fast as that plane, that database dropped out, is as fast as things will go wrong, in other areas of the flight. So you really, and
that's really focused. Why we have so many rules governing what we can and can't do on the flight deck. I know a lot of people think, well, all you do is, push the takeoff button on the autopilot, plane flies itself, and you guys just drink coffee Airbus, and read the Wall Street Journal and USA Today and all this stuff. And it's like, oh my God, you couldn't be further from the truth. Now, when things are going easy, you're at cruise, like that flight I just conducted last night, and it's 5.5 hour flight time. Straight, so 6 hours in that airplane. That was the second leg of the day. And, you stop and think, wow, we got hours of boredom, really. Yeah. But if you allow yourself to get distracted up there by doing something that is taking too much of your attention, that's not right. And there are plenty of rules. You're not supposed to be up there on another electronic device other than the one the company issues you, and you should only be looking at things that are pertinent to the flight. And we were looking at radar, and we were chasing different altitudes for turbulence and trying to keep it as smooth as possible. So we kept pretty busy. But when there's not much going on, and like Roger had alluded to earlier, saying, you guys have a checklist and you do 4 legs and it's the same checklist and you guys memorize that and it's day in, day out. Yeah, you absolutely get used to doing it, muscle memory, vocal memory, and things are just like everything's going to plan. It can be a little monotonous and tedious, and we do have a little extra time to kind of catch up on things and have a conversation in the cockpit, which is what I prefer. But sometimes you just want some quiet time, but all of a sudden something happens, ding, and you're like, oh crap, what's it doing, right?